ago, Doris and I were invited to serve as interim pastors for a small little church not far from here that we just absolutely fell in love with the people there, and we loved them so much, and they loved us so much that we ended up closing the church. I used to say, jokingly, oh, I've been kicked out of better churches than this. Now I say, oh, I've closed down better churches than this. But it seems like we were together for a time for a reason, that God brought us all together to go through. It was a great church that had made a great impact in our community, and it just kind of, I think, it seems like God had brought it to a place where those people could be sent out to other places. And the friendships that we made there in those months that we were there have remained with us for a long, long time. I'll never forget the first night that we met with the board of that church. And Doris and I sat in a little Sunday school classroom, and they were kind of interviewing us to see if they would want to sit and talk to us for the next 6 months. And one of the couples there immediately that Doris and I connected to, and it was Gary and Shannon Oren. Their commitment to God, their commitment to that little group of people, that church, just amazed me. And isn't it interesting when you get to know somebody and you kind of think you know them, and you just, man, these are great people, and then you begin to know their story and you think, wow, these are really great people. And so when we thought about Simply Free, we thought of Gary and Shannon and their story. And so I just am delighted to introduce to you my good friend and a great man of God who has an amazing story, Gary Oren.
Good morning. I want to tell you a little bit about myself real quick. I live here in Murfreesboro. I'm married to Shannon. I have a stepson, Gabe, who is in high school, and Shannon and I have a son together, Garrett, who's in elementary school. And first of all, I want to thank them for being by my side the last 12 years, going through this journey with me. It's not been easy, but it's been fulfilling. I grew up here in Murfreesboro. I was born and raised here, come from middle-class, hardworking parents. I'll get right to it. In November of 1981, I was 7 years old. My dad worked second shift. I woke that night about 3 o'clock in the morning when he was coming in. He was yelling for my mom to get the gun. I immediately raised up out of the bed. I see my mom going down the hallway, holding a handgun in her hand. The next thing I know, there's police and ambulances in our front yard. I'm paralyzed. I can't even get out of bed. I'm scared to death. Somehow, I amazingly go back to sleep, wake up. Later on, my dad's oldest brother, my Uncle Jack, was there. He told me and my brother, he said, your dad was in an accident. He fell going up the stairs, and y'all aren't going to go to school. You're going to stay with us. He had to go to the hospital, which I immediately knew was a lie, but I'm 7 years old and being respectful. I said, okay. He gets out of the hospital like a week later. They said it was a botched robbery. There was a guy waiting in the garage who had a tire tool that you take lug nuts off a tire with, and hit him in the head. The only thing that saved his life is he stuck his hand up and blocked it. They never could catch who did that. Fast forward 2 months later, January 1982, my dad goes hunting on a Saturday morning. Later on that morning, we have family and friends start coming over. A lot of people start coming to our house. My mom's upset. We have the next door neighbor comes in, who we were close with, an older lady, Mrs. Young, and told, sit me and my brother down on the bed and told us that my dad had been shot and didn't make it to the hospital. You talking about rocking a 7-year-old's world.
Right.
My world just got turned upside down. No more hunting trips, no more fishing trips, no more playing ball. You're in a nightmare and you're just waiting to wake up, but your reality is you're living that nightmare. Not long after that, my mom's younger brother, my Uncle Kevin, he and his wife and their new daughter moved in with us to help my mom out, take care of me and my brother. I My dad's case went cold. They never caught who did it. As a child, I had a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, self-worthlessness, trying to be perfect, beating myself up if I wasn't perfect. I dealt with that a lot. My mom started dating, ended up getting remarried. As I got in high school, that fear, anxiety, worthlessness turned. I filled that with drugs and alcohol. I was arrested for the first time as a sophomore in high school for drinking underage. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was smoking pot every day. I was getting drunk 2 or 3 times a week. I was popping pills. As I got out of high school, that drug use escalated into cocaine. I did everything but shoot up. I was searching, I was lost, I didn't know what I was feeling, didn't go to church, couldn't reach out to anybody, was hurt so tremendously from this traumatic thing as a kid that I couldn't get over. I was arrested for public intoxication, DUI, possession of marijuana. I walked away from numerous automobile accidents I shouldn't have walked away from. And I always just lived a reckless life that was on the road to nowhere. I was on a one-way trip to hell, and I was going to take everyone to go with me. They could jump on and go with me. When I was 27, I had an old shoulder injury that I had surgery for. That introduced me to pain pills. That was a 5-year addiction that I didn't think I would ever kick. That was probably the hardest thing I was ever on. I couldn't function without them. Something that started off so easily because of pain ended up into taking anywhere 14, 15 Lortabs a day. I couldn't go to work without them. I couldn't do anything without them. At that time, I met Shannon. We ended up getting married. She knew I partied, but she didn't know the extent of what my addiction was. I hid it. So I brought that into our marriage. I got saved, but I didn't live it. That was my fire insurance card, is what I called it. I didn't live it no more from how I was a week before I got saved to after I got saved. Then, as my addiction grew, there was a lot of trust issues with Shannon. She thought I was cheating on her. Money would come up missing. I would be gone getting pills. But I wasn't cheating on her. Well, actually, I was. My mistress was Lortabs. That's what I was filling it with. So I came home one day from work, had been out getting pills, doing what I was doing, lied about where I was at. Garrett was one. Gabe was probably in the 1st grade, and Shannon said something to me that just shook me to my core. She looked at me and said, "Are you even saved?" And with those words, it changed my life. I knew immediately that I had to rededicate my life, which I did. I started living for God. I started going to church, started really reading the Bible, taking it serious. I started going to a friend's Bible study down the road from my house. A good friend of mine, we grew up together. Actually, me and him had partied together, but he had changed his life around also. So we started going to his Bible study. At that time, I started learning a lot about forgiveness, in my heart about forgiving myself, trying to forgive other people for things. And he asked me to speak one night at his Bible study. So, of course, I said yes. And I was going to talk about my addictions, and I felt like I was really forgiving the person who had shot my dad. Well, I was getting ready to go down there to speak, and God spoke to me and said, "You say you've forgiven this person, but you haven't prayed for him yet." So, that was pretty hard, but I knew I had to do that. So when I knelt down, he told me it's not a 5-second prayer. So 10 to 15 minutes later, I got up. I'd never prayed like that before in my life, and I felt a release from heaviness that I'd had for 20 plus years. So I go down there to teach. It's great. About 6 months later, I get home from work one day, and there's a knock at my back door, and my wife answers the door, and there's a man there, and he has to speak to me, and I immediately see his badge on his leg. So first thing I'm thinking is I didn't live a very upstanding life 6 to 8 months beforehand, so I'm thinking something is, I'm going to get arrested. Something I did is coming back on me. So I walk out there, and that detective tells me something I never thought I'd hear. He said, "We have reopened your dad's case." And immediately, when I started getting in the Word, a verse that always stuck out to me, a small, simple verse I always thought that meant a lot to me, became my reality. Psalm 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. That's what I always desired at that point, to know what happened to my dad. Well, I would like to stand up here and tell you that it was all bed of roses the next year, 6 months of that investigation. But there was a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of hard times, a lot of going to the cemetery where my dad was buried, just sitting there. December of 2007, my uncle, who moved in with us right after my father was murdered, my Uncle Kevin was arrested for murdering my dad. He shot my dad. A week later, my mom and my stepfather were arrested for also charged with the murder of my dad. So you're talking about turning your world upside down again. Right. You know, these people you've lived with, you've trusted your whole life, that you had no clue, that helped lead you down the road. I made self-decisions myself, but it helped get me started on that path. Are now guilty of mere murder, your worst nightmare. So we went through the trial. That was a hard time. I had to get on the stand, testify against my mom that was putting her away for the rest of her life, and have her sit there and look at me like she didn't even know me. Was absolutely heartbreaking. But in that, God taught me to forgive as He has forgiven us.
Right.
So I knew that I lived a life of recklessness, anxiety, fear, hurt, and I was tired. I was tired of it. I was tired. I knew that I had to forgive them. So I forgave them for what they did. I prayed for each and every one of them and forgiving them. About 2 years later, I was going to give my testimony for the first time at my old church that Mike was just speaking of. And I was on a fast, and if any of you have ever fasted, you know you're real sensitive to the Spirit at that time. And God spoke to me, and I knew it was something, and He said that the guy who had hit my dad in the garage, that was the first attempt on my dad's death when I was, when my dad came home from work and he was hit in the head with a tire tool. That was one of my uncle who was arrested, one of his friends. They had hired him to do that. So he got immunity and he testified in court to what he had done. And he said some things that, frankly, I just wanted to get up and choke the life out of him. But I knew that wasn't the right thing to do. So God spoke to me and told me that He doesn't know him like I do, and I need to go forgive him. So I drove to that guy's work. I went inside, I asked for him. He came out, he didn't even know who I was at first. And I told him I was Gary Orand, and his eyes got about that big around, and he was terrified, I could tell. And I just looked at him and told him I forgive him for what he did when I was 7 years old. And Jesus sent me here to tell you that He loves you. And you could see, he went immediately. You could see a weight lifted off that guy. It was the most amazing thing I ever saw in my life. And not only did he do that, I did that. Because it was the last thing that I felt like I needed to do to be free of that. It's the most amazing thing. You always hear that forgiveness is not just for the other person, but it's for you. And that I'm living proof of that. I'm living testimony of that. And not only, I know my dad. I only had 7 years with him. He was a great man, and I remember all those 7 years, and he lived with no regrets. And I didn't want to live with any regrets anymore.
Right.
You know, I didn't want to live with, because the life I was living, I was going to put my kids through the same thing that I've been put through, just in a different, I was leading them in a different direction. And so I knew my dad would want me to forgive. He did not want me to be angry with anybody. And so I wake up every day trying to be the best husband, the best father I can be. Do I get that right all the time? No. But do I work toward it? I absolutely do. And that's my story. Thank you.